Armed with the fantastic advice of use a gauge, I set out to have a discussion with my parents yesterday. In retrospect, I should have asked Redditors for suggestions of one-liners to use, because going into a situation like this with a wing-it mentality meant I didn't throw in as many as I'd like to have. Nonetheless, the effect was absolutely golden. I showed up at my folks' place to make a surprise lunch for them while they were away at midday mass. About 10 minutes after my parents got home, we were sitting down to fresh plates of grilled salmon over sautéed snow peas. I found a prime opportunity to sneak in a curveball when my mother decided to go get witty about the meal.
So why salmon? We would have been just as surprised by pizza.
The response struck me like a bolt of lightning. I guess it's just a kick I'm on. It's really healthy. I found a great price and amazing recipes. I just can't get enough of it. It's like pink meat is just a part of me. My father chuckled, half to himself, while my mom leveled a strange look at me. It was like she wanted to laugh, but couldn't. She was obviously flabbergasted and caught off guard, which I've never even heard of happening to her. She looked at my dad, who simply shrugged and smiled back, and turned to her plate. After the most awkward silence I'd ever seen my family experience, the conversation picked back up, and we finished dinner. My parents offered to do the dishes while I cleaned up the grill. After a bit, my father came outside and, in silence, produced from his shirt pocket a joint, rolled with the immaculate form only 40+ years of practice can achieve. It was a piece of art, and something I never thought I'd see again. He'd stuck solely to a vaporizer and edibles since he quit smoking a decade ago. Yet here he was, sparking a J. Smoke weed every day. After a long drag, he bumped me in the shoulder with the back of his hand. I took the flaming sculpture, pinched the joint to my lips, and inhaled slowly and deeply while I put the grill back together. I passed it back and exhaled while I rinsed my hands with the hose. He knew I knew. I knew he knew I knew. We simply sat in silence and smoked, without a single word, an understanding resonating between us. Anything I needed to ask, he would answer. Anything I wanted to say, he would listen to. As the roach dwindled and my dad snubbed it out, he looked over his glasses and made direct eye contact with me.
Take it easy on your mom, okay? This is a tough one for her.
I thought for a moment and placed my hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, Dad. In regards to harsh sentiment, my lips are sealed. I busted out my biggest capital D face at the end, and he laughed hysterically as we walked into the house, where we were greeted by pistachio ice cream over peach cobbler with accompanying snifters of brandy. I remarked that how I'm not a fatty McFat after so many of my mom's desserts, I'll never know. Oh, peaches, I said to my plate as I sat down to the table again. It's like you're calling to some deep secret place within me. My dad glanced in my direction, as if to indicate I was laying it on a little thick, but the comment seemed to fly over my mom's head entirely. It's like a sitcom. Following dessert and a few more rounds of brandy at my father's urging, we decided to play some cribbage. By this time, the alcohol was taking effect, and my normally straight-laced businesswoman mother was getting into her boisterous, relaxed state. It's a side of her I never got to see while I was growing up, so it's always a treat when she gets the giggles. Early in the game, she had a huge lead. My father and I were pretty much tied while she was over 30 points ahead after the first 5 hands.
You guys need to step it up,
she said smugly while shuffling the cards.
It's like you're just giving this game away.
My father turned to me and said,
You heard your mother. Time to actually start playing.
I smiled and winked. I don't know that I can stop her. It's like I'm just bleeding peg points from a mysterious gaping hole. Really? My dad's eyes widened as he sat up straight in his chair, then looked over at my mom, who was slapping the table while laughing.
Don't worry, son,
she said while catching her breath.
God loves you no matter how many holes you have.
My face turned red, and I said a thank you to the ceiling. I'm agnostic. While my parents looked at each other with a knowing snicker. My father nudged my leg under the table and nodded at me. After we finished up the game plus a few more, the sun was low in the sky. The porch was lit with colors from western stained glass windows. A mural of a forest clearing, given as a gift from one of my mom's friends. My parents snuggled on the porch swing and planned the next day's events with one another while I lounged in an old crushed leather chair and took a few relaxed drags from a pipe. It's like The Hobbit. I was starting to question whether or not I should stay the course. After all, this wasn't some kind of devastating revelation to me, and what really could be gained from potentially disrupting my family's chill dynamic? There was a break in my parents' conversation as my dad left to go to the bathroom.
So, Ambi, what do you have planned for this week? Anything noteworthy, or are you just enjoying the downtime between writing projects?
My mother had a warm smile and sincere interest. How could I make such an important person in my life uncomfortable? I decided in this moment that I wasn't going to tell her about my discovery. There would be plenty of other better opportunities in the future. Actually, Mom, this last week was pretty intense. I'm just going to enjoy a bit of downtime. I should be heading out soon, though. I'm sure I've bothered you and Dad enough for one day.
Nonsense! You know we love when you visit. So what happened this week? Did you meet a girl?
Her mocking emphasis made me blush. Something like that, I replied. It's more like I got reacquainted with an old friend. She straightened herself on the porch swing.
Ooh, tell me more. Is she someone your father and I know?
You could say that, I chuckled, but I know it's going to become a long conversation, and I really need to get going. My dad came back in and sat down next to my mom.
What did I miss?
Oh, nothing much. Your son is teasing me with information,
she replied.
I just want him to tell me how his week went, and he's being a real pussy about it.
I had never heard her use that word in my entire life, and I never thought I would, owing to her feminist ideology. I looked on in disbelief while my parents laughed, high-fived each other, then looked in my direction. Then it dawned on me. She was aware of what I'd been trying to do. So how long have I been on the hook?
Since your first crack about the salmon. Your father and I talked about it while we did the dishes, before we went out to smoke with you. Did you really think you'd be able to play a joke on the people who taught you your sense of humor?
My face turned a beet red, and I smiled at my father. Thanks for setting me up, Dad. He stood up and bowed, still laughing. A long talk followed, and some notable chunks of information came to light. There was never any reassignment surgery, and the extra bits are where they are by nature. Additionally, it's all extremely underdeveloped and non-functional. We're talking 4 to 6 inches from the vaginal entrance in my rectum to the terminal end of what would be a sort of proto-uterus. I guess it's all mashed up in there and kind of a mess. So my hopes of having things redirected and potentially usable are entirely dashed. There are no ovaries, which I strongly suspected from the get-go. All of the lady parts I have occupy a volume roughly equivalent to a few golf balls. My parents knew about this since I was 4 years old, and were surprised that I didn't remember my first big visit to the doctor. I had managed to wedge a Lego piece up in my sniz while visiting my cousins and had to go see the doctor. He wanted to excise the defunct sex organs, but my parents, rightfully, in my opinion, decided not to go that route. So now we come to why I wasn't told. I still have mixed feelings about being kept in the dark, but I totally understand why it was done and harbor no resentment whatsoever. It was due to a perfect storm of factors, really. First and foremost, I was raised in a small Midwestern town, and if the pussy cat got out of the bag, it would have led to utter social ostracism from the entire family. My folks are also prominent church members, and while their parish has become quite progressive over the years, thanks to their influence, this kind of thing would have gone over like a lead balloon in the 80s. It also would have had repercussions on my mom's business career. She has had to fight tooth and nail, and still does, against cultural stigma regarding working women, and having an intersexed child would most certainly have been used against her. There is simply no way she'd have been allowed to rise to prominence in the business world. My parents had many talks with each other over the years about telling me, but always decided against it. They felt that it would impact the way in which my sexual and gender identity naturally developed, and I have to admit, they are right about that. I'm actually very appreciative of this motivation, as it shows their respect for the idea that I am my own person. It was always agreed that when the time came, and I asked about it, that they would be totally open and honest with me. But my folks were certainly surprised that it took this long to discover. They initially thought that I'd known for a while, and just finally brought it up. So that's pretty much that.